Is the Nikon Z50 good enough for landscape photography? Short answer, yes. Anyways guys, thanks for watching my video. What's up guys, it's Project Photography, about another video, and today we're gonna be talking about and actually discussing the Nikon Z50 for landscape photography. Now this is a very underrated camera in the Nikon Z ecosystem. It's overshadowed by great cameras like the Z6 II, Z7 II, even the original Z6, Z7, Z5. There's a lot of cameras that surpass this, but let us not forget that this is actually an incredible camera. I've created a lot of great images over these past couple of months, and I'm just really happy with this for landscape photography. There's a lot of people that have a ton of doubts as to what this camera can do and is it the right tool for landscape photography. And I'm here to destroy all of those different talking points against this camera because I really love this thing and what it can do. And I want to jump into a little bit of discussion at the end about how this camera really is a turning point for landscape photography and photography as a whole in the camera industry in terms of, like, you know, what can we use for landscape photography. This really pushes the boundaries and shows that, you know, our traditional way of thinking about landscape photography is about to change in the next couple of years. So when it comes to actually using the Nikon Z50, I primarily use it for telephoto work. I use it as my secondary body to my Nikon Z6, but I can absolutely see how you can use it as a main body with a wide angle lens. There's some very good cheap options out there like the 10-20, and that's pretty much it for crop sensor Nikon lenses. The 10-24 is a great lens. The Tokina 11-16 f2.8 was one of my personal favorites. I use that a lot for my landscape photography. And with the Z50, there's a bunch of advantages that it has over the full frame cameras. Not really huge advantages, but they are advantages nonetheless. So what makes the Z50 great for landscape photography? The first one is obviously that it's more lightweight. Weighing in around 400 grams, it makes it a great lightweight choice to carry around for your landscape photography. It being lightweight means that you can, you know, carry more stuff with you, have a lighter load, not have to worry about that weight being an issue on those longer hikes. So weight is obviously a great deal for me when it comes to landscape photography. On top of that, ergonomics are great. Because it's so small, it just fits in the palm of your hand like this, and it just works. You know, it doesn't feel like things are getting in the way. Buttons are where they should be. A different controls are similar to that of a Z6, Z7, and all those sorts of things. And it just feels good in the hands. Only problem is that it's plastic, but you know, it's for a Z50, it's much cheaper. You can kind of deal with that. And one main thing that I really love about this camera, and a main reason why I actually picked it up, is because it has similar color science to that of the Nikon Z6, Z7, and that whole full frame lineup. Nikon has excellent color science. I cannot stress this enough. That is the main reason why I love my Nikon cameras and why I will not switch to pretty much any other brand. Their color science is unreal. Like, you take photos, you look at it in the back of the camera, and you're just like, oh yeah, that's really nice. And I say that because, you know, I just really enjoy shooting with it. It just creates amazing images. And, you know, when you take those files back to your computer and you compare them side by side to a Z6, you can just tell that, man, that color science is really putting in the work. They look great, and I'm just really happy with how the files come out. So clearly, I love the Nikon Z50. It's an incredible camera for a lot of great reasons. But there are a few reasons why I think a lot of people doubt what the Z50 can do when it comes to landscape photography. The first one, dynamic range. Is it good enough for landscape photography? And the short answer to that is absolutely yes. I mean, you're shooting everything at ISO 100, pretty much. So you're not gonna be shooting into those higher ISO ranges. You're not gonna be worrying about dynamic range nearly as much. If you're shooting at ISO 100, I mean, it's really hard to, you know, get that shadows going and show a lot of noise. I mean, when you talk about, you know, what it can do when it comes to dynamic range, if you shoot for the highlights and bring up the shadows after, you're gonna get clean images every single time. And as a landscape photographer, that's really what matters. On top of it, when you're shooting things like panoramas, I feel like I get a bit more dynamic range just because of the fact that when you're shooting up from a panorama, you're able to capture the individual details of each frame. That includes the shadows, so you get better dynamic range that way. On top of it, when I'm using the telephoto stuff, I really shoot in HDR quite a bit, and that pushes dynamic range far beyond the limits of what this sensor can provide. So dynamic range, is it good enough? Yes, absolutely. You just don't have to know how to use it. Shoot at ISO 100 pretty much all the time and you're good to go. Now, resolution. I know a lot of people are like, oh, 20 megapixel isn't enough for landscape photography. But let me tell you, it is more than fine enough. If I can print 24 by 36s on this 20 megapixel resolution, that's completely fine, and you definitely can. I really don't see 20 megapixels being an issue. Back in the good old days, we used to be able to print 12 megapixel photos on 20 by 30s and not have a problem. And here's the thing, when it comes to resolution and print sizes, it's not about the megapixel count, because you could have a 100 megapixel camera but just have terrible lenses that are not sharp corner to corner, and you're going to come out with photos with these big 100 megapixel files, by mind you, that just are not sharp, that don't look good. If you have a 20 megapixel camera, on the other hand, with a sharp lens like the 50 to 250 is, you're not going to have a problem when it comes to sharpness. It's just sharp all the way around. You can see every single detail, and that's exactly what you want in a landscape photography camera. So when it comes to resolution, the sharpness of the lens is much more important. 20 megapixels is just fine. You don't need 45 and all those crazy things, especially for telephoto type of stuff. And because this is a telephoto camera, that's what I'm using it for, at least, panoramas are a must, and pretty much that's a lot what I shoot when it comes to the telephoto aspect. So when you're shooting panoramas, you can turn that 20 megapixel sensor into a 50 megapixel file. That is ridiculous, and that's something that I don't think a lot of people understand or realize when it comes to landscape photography, that you can shoot panoramas, you can surpass that megapixel count when it comes to the Nikon Z50. So resolution is not a big issue for me. Shoot panoramas, I have sharp lenses, so in reality, not a really big deal. Now, the last and final thing that I think a lot of people have when it comes to doubts about the Nikon Z50 is APS-C size sensors good enough for landscape photography. And the best way that I can put this is that my favorite landscape photographer, yes, my 100% favorite landscape photographer of all time, Andy Mumford, who, by the way, creates very good videos, he shoots with all Fujifilm stuff, which is all APS-C. And when it comes to sensor size, yes, it does play a factor. Yes, the bigger the sensor, usually the better. But with the Z50, what this is showing is that sensor size is not the be-all end-all when it comes to creating amazing landscape images. And of course, you know, the Nikon Z6 is just built different. Full frame is better when it comes to that, but APS-C can definitely handle the image quality, the processing, you know, everything about that quality of image that you get from the Z50 is just fine. I don't feel like I'm losing a ton of quality when I'm dropping down to an APS-C size sensor. I feel like dynamic range, all that is good. And if a professional landscape photographer who does this for a living, like Andy Mumford, uses APS-C cameras for his work, I'm pretty sure a Z50 will do just fine. Don't let that whole, you know, do I have the right sensor size, fool you into thinking that you can't create amazing images, because you really can. The Z50 puts in a ton of work. I love it. It's just so good. It just creates such good images. They're simply exquisite. I don't know how to put it any other way. So in short answer, yes, you can absolutely use this camera for landscape photography. I would even be comfortable using it as my wide angle camera with probably like a 10 to 20 or a 11 to 16 by Tokina. And it's just gonna create amazing images. Now for specific niche type of stuff, I probably wouldn't use it for things like astrophotography. That's probably the only situation that I wouldn't really use it in, but for pretty much all the landscapes, I would be more than happy, more than comfortable using it for pretty much anything you want. And nowadays, we're getting to a point where cameras are performing exceptionally well. I would not be super comfortable using a APS-C size sensor for my landscape photography probably 8-7 years ago. We're reaching a point where, like, and I know photographers say this a lot, like, oh, camera does not matter, you know, the amazing images you can create. But we're really getting to a point where cameras can move out of the way and let the photographer really take over and control what he wants when it comes to the image quality, what they want in the scene, and all these great things. They're the ones that are really putting in the work, and their cameras are getting out of the way. And that's what the Z50 shows us. I mean, we're getting the same great image quality, we're getting the same great dynamic range, we're getting the same great Nikon lenses and colors, and I mean, it just gets out of the way, lets me do what I want to do, and that's really what I care about at the end of the day. You know, whether it be full frame, APS-C, even micro four thirds to an extent, they're all going to create amazing images. I know some landscape photographers that use a Panasonic G9 for their landscape photography. I actually really like that camera. I think it's a pretty cool camera, but you know, that's the kind of stuff they're using, and they're coming out with great images, and they're not letting things like resolution, sensor size get in the way of creating great images. And you can really see that it does not make nearly as much of a difference. Using a blind eye test, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference between full frame, APS-C. It's really all up in our heads nowadays because these cameras can create such great images. And the Nikon Z50 is simply a symptom of all of that. It's a small little camera that creates great images in a great form factor, price point, and all that sorts of stuff. Even though it's not necessarily meant to be used as a landscape photography camera, I'm pretty sure when they were making this, they weren't like, oh, landscape photographers would love this. Pretty sure they were not thinking that, but still it delivers on all those fronts. Just like pretty much any camera can nowadays. It's pretty incredible to see the time and period that we're living in, to the point where eye autofocus is a major, decision maker for a lot of people. Think about 10 years back then, probably was not even in the minds of people. I mean, who would have thought that you could be able to just focus on an eye and have it do exactly what you wanted to do? I mean, we're moving to a point where technology is really outpacing the photographer. I honestly, past something like an A1, it would be really hard to say what I want more than that in a camera. I mean, it does everything on every single front. And man, if Nikon can nail that with a Nikon Z9 in the future, I mean, that's like the be-all end-all cameras. You don't really need anything else other than that. It's going to be incredible to see where we're moving towards in the future and what improvements we can even make past this point. I mean, if I can be using an APS-C camera for landscape photography, pretty sure that anybody could use any camera for pretty much any situation for the most part, with some obvious caveats. It's a great thing to see technology evolving to the point where photographers can just continue to move past technology. It's a great thing to see how camera tech is moving in such an incredible pace. And as photographers, we should be absolutely grateful and just realize that it's not the camera anymore that's determining our photography. It's us. It's us that's actually going out there and shooting the photos. It's us that are, the ones clicking the shutter button. It's us editing it in Photoshop, Lightroom, Capture One, all those sorts of editing softwares. And with this improvement in technology, we can have our worries about our camera gear, push it to the side, and just focus on the art of photography. So anyways, guys, this is actually the end of the video. Like, comment, and subscribe. And what do you think about the Nikon Z50 as a camera for landscape photography? Would you use this camera for your own work? Let me know down in the comment section down below. Anyways, guys, rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.